Look out, Sony and LG, Samsung has done it again.
Let's go. Yo, I'm like an addict, do I gotta have it. I ain't even playing, got a really bad habit. If it moves, gotta grab it, fuse like a magnet. Lose, won't have it till I'm doomed in a casket. I ain't playing, got a weird mind. If you work 8 hours, I'ma work 9. If this tastes sour, you should taste mine. I'ma stay in power for a long time.
What is up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Max. In today's video, I'm going to be covering the Samsung S95c review. Starting off in 2023, this is one of my first reviews, and I will say this: the Samsung S95c should be considered as one of your top TVs to choose for this year. Now, there are some caveats to the S95c. If you want to know more, hit that like button and that subscribe button. I greatly appreciate it. Now let's go ahead and dive into this review. To start things off, I am on firmware 1100. At the time of this review, this is the latest update that I had on the S95c. When it comes to design, Samsung has made some updates to the S95c. If you're familiar with the QN900B, QN800B, and the QN95B, Samsung has implemented the One Connect box where it has four HDMI 2.1s, followed by the USB, and connected to a One Connect that connects to the TV. Now this is a neat feature just because that if anyone who is planning on wall mounting their TV, the One Connect box will be very helpful for people for when it comes to hiding wires. So one thing that Samsung has done, they did do an update to the remote where they made it smaller. But one thing I do want to harp on is please add an input button. I know you had the double click feature, but just add an input button. And it would be nice if you have a backlit remote. But besides that, I do like it being solar powered, which is a great feature. So just like last year, you still have the Tizen home menu where you have the media tab, the gaming hub. You also have the ambient tab where you get to display your S95C with different wallpapers. So the layout is identical to last year versions. There are some minor differences. One being in the picture mode, you do have the option for the HDR tone mapping where you can switch from static to active. And I'll go over that a little bit shortly. When you go to sound, is the same as last year version. I did run into an eARC issue. I did mention that in my previous video. It's still not resolved. So for people who have home theater systems, you may run into this issue. I don't know if it's the TV itself or my receiver. I did try multiple different options where I switched the inputs to the TV and I switched it to the receiver, but I was still running into the issue. Even my receiver had a firmware update and I still had the same issue where the audio was dropping out. So power and energy savings, I make sure that I have everything off. Reason being is that you want your S95C working to its best capabilities. So in panel care, you do want to disable auto logo brightness and pixel shift. That's another setting that would hinder your S95C. Now switching to the meat and potatoes of this review. When I did a comparison with the Sony X95K against the Samsung S95C, I was shocked. Now, when you go into the picture menu and you switch it and toggle between static and active, that is going to be a considered as a game changer for Samsung folks who are interested in buying this TV. When you switch it from active, this TV will get close to a mini LED TV. And I will repeat, it is very close to a mini LED from last year, 2022. And some of my comparisons that I'm doing right now, if you're looking at this on screen, you can see that it is going head to head, toe to toe with the Sony X95K. Now, when it comes to SDR, yeah, the Sony X95K will be brighter in this instance, but the S95C does a really good job in that department. So I just wanted to throw that out there for anyone who is interested when it comes to the SDR comparison. But when it comes to HDR, that is something that Samsung is they they did a really good job. Blow for blow, it was competing against the Sony X95K. Now, granted, The Sony X95K is brighter when it comes to those instances, but Samsung S95C, that is something to really think about if you're really on the fence of purchasing this TV. Now, sticking with the picture category, let's go ahead and talk about if this is brighter than the S95B from last year. Now, unequivocally, I would say yes, but on day 1 firmware update, I would say that they are close to each other, but I would say that the S95C in all areas has done a great job. But enough about the whole brightness situation. Let's talk about when it comes to color, comes to detail, when it comes to motion. One thing that I could say that the Samsung S95C did, they did a great improvement over the S95B when it comes to motion. And I will say that it's on par with Sony motion from last year, especially when you're looking at the A95K. That is something very huge to say when it comes to their motion. When it comes to posterization, I will say that they did a major upgrade in the posterization area, especially when it comes to gaming. And I always mention it in all my videos and all my reviews when it comes to posterization. One thing that Samsung has did a major upgrade on is in that area. When it comes to colors and detail, out of the box settings. Now, for Samsung, I think they did a lot better job than it was from last year. Last year had a real push of red in the tones, but this year it looks like Samsung is really trying to go for the accuracy area. And I will say that out of the box, it's still a little bit of push of red in certain areas. Now, I will say, especially when it comes out of box settings, that I think, from my opinion, is getting closer to the A95K of last year. Now, don't get me wrong, the A95K would be better when it comes to accuracy wise, but Samsung did a good job this year and it's close. And I don't think, unless you have the two TVs side by side to each other, you're not going to know the difference. And you'll be pleasantly surprised when it comes to the picture. So, a couple other things I want to touch on when it comes to the picture wise, when it comes to detail. Now, the detail, they did improve from last year S95B, but comparing it to a A95K or the Sony TVs just in general, I will say that when it comes to depth and details, Sony still has the lead in that department. Now, Samsung S95C of this year did a good job, but that's one thing that I have noticed when I was doing comparisons as well, even on the Sony X95K. The Sony X95K being a mini LED, I will say in certain instances that it had more detail than the S95C. But depending on the content, in certain other contents, the S95C will also have better detail than the X95K depending on what you're watching. But if I'm comparing this to a A95K, the A95K still takes the lead on that. But unless you have these two TVs side by side to each other, you wouldn't know the difference. Now, last thing I need to talk about in the picture area is Black Crush. Now, on the S95C, since I had the TV, you will see a little bit of Black Crush, but it's nowhere near like the S95B that I saw from last year. So that is great news. It seems that Samsung is listening in that department when it comes to the picture category, and that's something that I have noticed when it comes to the shadow detail and the blacks. However, if you're comparing it to a Sony X95K, which I have done in my previous video or even in this video, you can see that Sony still had the edge in that area. For the S95C, Samsung has done a great job in the picture category compared to the S95B of last year version. So, but at the same time too, who's to say that may change when it comes to firmware update? That's one of Samsung's biggest weaknesses, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in this video review. Now I'm about to go ahead and switch to the gaming area. Now switching up to the gaming side. So one thing that Samsung has done, they had added a extra feature called the virtual aim point. Now the virtual aim point is something that for people who have gaming monitors and they use the crosshair is identical to that. If you're using shooter or you're playing shooting games, this is something that may be a benefit for you, especially when it comes to competitive gaming. One thing I also wanted to note is not new, but they have added this to the game bar. It's Game Motion Plus in the 2022 version of Samsung that was buried in the sub menu. Now that Samsung has bought that forth in the gaming bar, so if anyone is interested, especially when it comes to Game Motion Plus, is now in front of you instead of going to multiple menus trying to turn that on. Now let's talk about some of the issues that I ran into. If you watched my previous videos before, I did run into an eARC issue. Now it could be just a Samsung TV or it could be my receiver. I tried multiple ways of connecting it. I tried connecting my console through the receiver and I also tried connecting it to the TV and both options didn't work. You did see that I had an issue where that when I had it connected to the receiver, you can see that it was starting to flicker. If I connected to the audio, if I connected the console to the TV, the audio was dropping out. And even when I connected my Apple TV to the TV or the receiver, I was still having audio dropouts. So my receiver did come up with a firmware update, and I thought that will resolve everything, but it did not. I'm still having the same issue. So maybe in the next firmware update, Samsung may resolve that. So I'm not going to say that it's not going to be fixed or not, or it's just one of those type of things. But I just want to throw that out to everyone who has a home theater system that you may run into this issue. However, if you really don't care about home theater systems and you just want to use this TV as a speaker, the TV speakers are great as it is. It's one of those things that I think Samsung has done a great job with the TV speakers, the internal speakers specifically. If you're familiar with the QN900B or the QN800B, those speakers are really great out of the box. And I would even say that the internal speakers are better than the S95B from last year. So if people who are trying to play Atmos on the TV internal speakers, I think are decent enough. I mean, but for me, on the other hand, I still would consider a sound bar or a home theater system. But if you really don't care about that, the TV speakers do a great job. So the next issue that you may run into is the infamous Samsung firmware. So if you remember with the S95B when it first launched, it's a completely different TV from when you first purchased a TV to the end of the year with the multiple firmware updates that came out. Or if people who purchased this TV towards the end of the year or right now will see it as being a different TV than what the reviewers have mentioned when it first came out. So those are kind of like one of the things to be worried about if you're going to buy the S95C or any Samsung TVs just in general. It's just something that I just want to put an awareness out there that it may become an issue or it may not become an issue. Those are kind of like the things to think about. One option is you can just have this TV disconnected or not, but that is up to you if you want to go that route. But it's just some of the things that just need to throw that out there. But it's not just Samsung. Sony is has some issues as well, and I bet you that LG probably has some issues as well with their TVs. So it's not just only Samsung, but Samsung is known to make firmware updates where it would change the picture or change some settings when it comes to game mode. So those are kind of like the things that anyone who is thinking about buying this TV should be aware of. So I'm about to go ahead and wrap this review up on the Samsung S95C. Now, I mentioned the positive and the negatives with this TV, but in my experience, the positive outweigh the negative in this situation. So if you're a person who already had the Samsung S95B and thinking about upgrading to the S95C, the only way that I will recommend this TV specifically is if you're going to a bigger size TV. This will be something to get. If you're going ahead and switching from a 55 to another 55-inch version or a 65 for another 65-inch version, I would say just hold off for now. Reason being is we don't know what's going to happen in the future when it comes to updates from Samsung. But as of right now, in this review, this TV should be on your top of the list for 2023. If you have been on the fence of thinking about getting a QD OLED, this is something that I would personally recommend. This TV is great. The other thing that I kind of wish that Samsung will work on in the future in 2024 is hopefully they'll come out with a bigger size model than the 77-inch. Hopefully they'll come out with an 85-inch or an 88-inch version of the QD OLED. I'll say this right now, if they do come out with a bigger size TV, this is something that will sway me over to get a QD OLED. The only reason I'm not upgrading to the Samsung is because I don't want to go down in size. So those are kind of like the things I think about. And if you're on the fence, is thinking about going from an 85-inch to a 77-inch, that's something that I won't recommend because I think, for my opinion, I think the bigger size is better, especially when it comes to my use case and when it comes to immersion. I'm still going to go ahead and keep my Sony X95K, but if next year if Samsung come with a bigger size screen TV, I may be all over it and I may go ahead and sell my Sony X95K. But as it stands right now, I do see the upgrades that the S95C has this year. And so those are the things that I just want to mention. But if you could do me a favor by hitting that like button and that subscribe button, I greatly appreciate it. And let me know in the comments of what your thoughts are on the S95C. And until next time, I'll see you on the next video. Take care. Bye.